Hey guys, welcome back. This is a story about what if Izuku had a bone manipulation quirk with one for all. Changes occur in his life when he finally awakens his own quirk. Before we start, thank you for the support in the last video. This really means a lot to me. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and to leave a like in this video, and you can suggest a My Hero Academia fanfiction with a link in the comments if you want me to read it, and check the description for the creator of this great fanfic and support them for making this fanfic. So let's start. Chapter 4: Contact. Earlier. After classes ended, Izuku and his friends made their way out of the building. But before they could even head home, he needed to take care of two things first. Wait, Izuku called out as he made his way in front of Ida and Bakugo, confusing them. Although Ochako seemed to catch on and couldn't help but smile. With a sheepish expression, he held out a hand to them. No hard feelings? Ida immediately understood and shook his hand with a smile. None at all, Midoriya. Like I said, it was a learning experience. And rest assured there won't be any bad blood between us, he finished, making Izuku nod with a smile. Izuku then turned to Bakugo with an extended hand. The latter staring at it blankly for a moment before grabbing it with a huff. Yeah, good game or some shit, he said with an eye roll as he let go of the hand. But don't get too comfy, I'll just kick your ass next time, he finished with a smirk. Izuku just laughed and shook his head. Never change, Kaken, he said with a smile, while Bakugo grunted before he and the group started moving again. Only to stop again when Izuku wanted to add something else. One more thing, he looked to his feet as the group stopped and turned to him. Though this time Ochako and Ida turned to him with concerned faces. Meanwhile, Bakugo turned to him with an annoyed expression. Oh, for fuck's sake. What is it this time? He shouted, making the three sweat drop. I already shook your fucking hand. He huffed. Izuku cleared his throat and faced the explosive teen. I just want to talk to Ochako. Can you and Ida wait for a bit? He said, making the three confused. Bakugo gave him a weird before eventually nodding. Fine, but hurry the fuck up, he waved it off as he and Ida went ahead to give them some privacy. Is everything all right? Ochako asked in concern as she stood in front of him. Doing his best to compose himself, though still embarrassed, Izuku started. Actually, I need advice, Ochako gave him a curious look. I plan to hang out with Ishida more, but I don't exactly know how to do it. And since you're a girl and all, I wanted to know how dash. He was interrupted by a hug from a squealing Ochako. Really? I'm so happy for you. She bounced in place for a bit before releasing a very red-faced Izuku, before she placed both hands on his shoulders and looked into his eyes with eagerness. So where are you taking her on a date? Somehow Izuku turned redder from the question as his mind short-circuited. It's not a DD date. Ochako simply responded by giving him a knowing look that didn't help. I just want to get to know her more, he insisted while looking around, making sure that no one was listening in. I'm not really good with these kind of things, so I felt it was best to ask advice from you. He then turned to her with hopeful eyes and a shaky smile. Ochako's expression softened into one of understanding. So what do you want to know? After taking a few breaths, Izuku looked at her. As you can tell, I like making friends, he received a nod. But with her it feels different. He sighed and stared at his feet. I just want to know the best way to ask her. So basically, you like her, Ochako said with a knowing grin. Though very red in the face, Izuku made eye contact with her. I'm not sure, he confessed, making her confused. To be honest, I want to figure out these feelings first. But I do want to get to know her. He lightly smiled. Plus, even if it doesn't work out, I'd be fine with just being friends. In all honesty, this was the first time Izuku experienced these feelings. So he needed to be absolutely sure that these feelings were real, and not just some phase. Plus, he meant when he said that just being friends would be good enough for him. Ochako nodded in understanding with a smile. Well, that's easy then, she agreed, gaining Izuku's full attention. Just be yourself, Deku, she encouraged. Not expecting that, Izuku gave her a look of confusion. Huh? She giggled at his expression. Believe it or not, just being yourself is the best approach to this situation, she said knowingly. His expression then turned into a one of concern. But what if I say something wrong? He then looked away with a grimace. Or what if I say something stupid, insensitive, or even off dash? He was interrupted when Ochako firmly grabbed his shoulders and wore a stern expression. Deku, she berated with a semi-loud voice, snapping him out of his dilemma as she continued. You're a good person that cares about others. I should know, I experienced your friendship firsthand, she reassured with a light chuckle. Her words helped him calm down and promptly gave her a hug. That means a lot, thanks bud, he said as he lightly tightened the hug. Ochako eagerly returned the hug with equal gusto. Anytime, Deku, if you need any more advice I'm all ears. And don't you worry, I'll keep this to myself, she encouraged in a soft tone. He smiled. Right, he loosened the hug with big smiles on their faces. They were about to reunite with the others when Izuku stopped while checking his things. He then crouched down and opened his bag to double-check. Turning around, Ochako looked at him with concern. What's wrong, Deku? Izuku looked up with an embarrassed look on his face. Well, I may or may not have forgotten something in the classroom. You guys can go ahead while I go get it, he said sheepishly. Are you sure? Ochako asked. Izuku nodded to that. Yeah, I'm sure, I've stalled you guys long enough anyway. He stood up. See you tomorrow. He grinned. Ochako looked unsure but eventually nodded. Well, okay then, see you tomorrow, Deku. She waved him goodbye before making her way to Ida and Bakugo. Chuckling to himself, Izuku waved his friends goodbye before heading back. UA Grounds 1A classroom. Upon entering, he immediately saw his notebook on the teacher's desk. Aizawa must have expected him to return for it. Thanks, sensei. He chuckled as he grabbed the notebook and placed it in his bag. After making sure that everything was indeed where it was supposed to be, he made his way out of the building. UA Grounds. On his way down, he began thinking of ways to approach Ishido about this. Maybe after classes tomorrow, or maybe through a text message. The option to ask her friends are there as well. But it might draw some unwanted attention, which could backfire on both of them. Sighing at the last thought, Izuku shrugged. Well, either way I need to find the right moment to. He trailed off in his mind when he saw a familiar head of pink hair. It appears Ishido was making her way home, and from what he could see, she was alone. Or we could do it now, he thought with a light gulp as he caught up with her. Hey, Ishido, Izuku stuttered out, getting her attention. Present time. How about we hang out sometime? Izuku said in a calm tone, but his facial expression betrayed him. Time seemed to freeze for the both of them, which only made him scream mentally. Did he say it wrong? Did it sound desperate? He thought about taking it back, but his voice died in his throat. In the meantime, Mina processed what he asked. She played it back in her head a few times before her eyes then widened at the realization. Did you just ask me out? She asked with a shocked and purple face. Izuku's face also changed color as he scrambled to explain himself. No. He half shouted in slight panic, making her confused. I mean, he quickly composed himself. It's just that I had fun and I wanted to get to know you more, he confessed as he looked away, expecting some sort of negative comment. Sure thing, Mina agreed with an easy smile, making Izuku snap at her in surprise. The color on her face went back to normal, though there was still a bit of lilac on her cheeks. Really? The tomato-faced hero stammered. Mina nodded with a smile that caused his heart to flutter. Yeah, I mean I was actually planning on asking you the same thing, He gaped at the statement. I pretty much wanted to know about you too. Shaking off his shock, Izuku's expression lit up. Great. Well, I'll see you around then, he said as he prepared to head back home. Dude. Mina called out, making him stop and turn to her with an eyebrow raised. You didn't really say when or where, she teased with a sly grin. Realizing her point, Izuku paled. Oh, he blushed in embarrassment. Mina giggled at his expression, and then added. How about this? She gestured between them. We can figure it once we meet each other at the mall during the weekend, she proposed. Izuku nodded with enthusiasm. Sounds like a plan to me. He chuckled. I can already tell that this'll be fun, he ended with a smile, a gesture she returned. Oh, and by the way, Mina suddenly said before turning away from him and looking over her shoulder with a smile. Call me Mina, she winked before moving on with lilac on her cheeks, leaving a dumbstruck Izuku behind. And although blushing as well, he nodded with a wave before leaving with a goofy grin on his face. They then went on their separate ways, heading home with big smiles on their faces and excitement for what's to come on the weekend. The next day. As Izuku rode the train to school, his thoughts drifted to his encounter with Mina yesterday. He spent the remainder of the night thinking about his feelings. By now the thoughts that he had for Mina had developed into a full-on crush. But unfortunately, the love-struck boy still wasn't sure how to approach the subject. He wasn't even sure if things will even work out between them. UA Grounds front entrance. Walking to his school, Izuku thought about his current situation. Sure, he asked her to hang out yesterday, but that didn't mean he had a real plan on what to do. Of all the challenges he expected to face on his journey to become a hero, he never would have expected hanging out with his crush to be one of them. Suddenly the idea of battling another zero-pointer didn't sound so hard now. Chuckling at the thought, Izuku shook his head. I guess crushes are more complex than any villain. He muttered to himself as he caught sight of UA. Welp, life wasn't meant to be straightforward. His thoughts were interrupted when he saw what looked to be a large gathering of people in front of UA's gate. What's this all about? Izuku could tell it wasn't an attack since there wasn't any noticeable damage, but he decided to take a closer look. Upon closer inspection, he was able to identify the mob as a dozen reporters in front of UA who seemed interested in talking to any UA student or pro-hero teacher. Some reporters broke off from the group and interviewed a few students from the support class. Said students looked overwhelmed and tried to answer the questions as best they could. Izuku then noticed a few more reporters breaking off to interview 1B students now. The reporters were firing off so many questions that he honestly wasn't able to pick up any of it. Ain't this something? His sweat dropped as the 1B students were just as overwhelmed as he was and politely excused themselves as they pushed through the mob. He looked ahead, noting how the mob looked smaller now thanks to some breaking off from them. Looks manageable, but still too many. He looked down at himself before shrugging. Welp, nothing I can do about it, I guess. As he made his way through, bracing himself for any bombardment of questions, he was pleasantly surprised that the reporters didn't even approach him. It seems as though he simply wasn't interesting looking, which suited Izuku just fine. Once he got through, he breathed a sigh of relief. I don't think I'll ever get used to media attention if it reaches me, Izuku said to himself as he glanced back at the mob of reporters with a nervous expression. You and me both. Turning around in surprise, he was met with an annoyed Izawa looking at the reporters. The mob noticed this and tried to get him to answer questions. Only for a steel door to appear and keep the reporters out. Once making sure that no one got through, the pro turned to Izuku. Trust me, it's best to keep them out, he then gestured to the school. I should mark others late, but since those vultures are in the way I'll let it pass. Izuku nodded but looked reluctant. But sir, what about the other students out there? He eyed the steel door with an expression similar to that of one who abandoned people to the wolves. Or vultures in this case. Izawa looked amused by his expression, but hid it behind his scarf and lazily waved a hand. "Don't worry, the staff and I can rescue them." Izuku turned to him with a questioning look. In a world of quirks, one must always be prepared for situations like this. Taking the pro's words to heart, Izuku eyed the door again before nodding to his teacher with a smile. "All right, sensei." He lightly bowed before heading to the classroom. The erasure pro watched him go with a tiny smile before turning to the door with a tired sigh. "Better call Hisashi," he muttered as he took out his phone. "He's the only one loud enough to disperse a flock like this." UA Grounds 1A classroom 10 minutes later. From his seat, Izuku idly listened as his classmates chatted about the media attention they got. The moment didn't last as Aizawa walked in, effectively silencing everyone in the room. "I took the liberty of reviewing your mock battles yesterday," he casually said as he made it to his desk while a few students became nervous. "Bakugu," Aizawa called, gaining the teens' attention. "This isn't a competition, stop acting like a child and take it seriously. Don't waste your skills on personal things," he finished while looking at him in the eye. "Got it," Bakugu said with a nod. Ida, the glasses-wearing teen, met the pro's tired gaze. "If you have any ideas, make sure you tell your teammate immediately. If you believe it's best to stay together, then say so. Teamwork is essential in the world of pros. Without unity you're doomed to fail, understood?" Ida stood up and bowed. "Yes, sensei," he shouted. The pro's eye twitched while the student's sweat dropped at the overzealous teen. Ashido, the pink teen, shrank a bit from the pro's gaze. "Not too bad, but you need to think for yourself more. Following plans is all good, but you need to pitch in your own ideas as well." "Got it, teach." Mina replied cheerfully, only to sweat when the pro hero glared at her. Yes, sensei," she corrected in a frightened tone. The pro hero nodded and turned to Izuku, who was patiently waiting for his turn. "Midoriya," the teen gulped from the gaze. "Not bad either. You took the battle seriously and used your analysis to defend the bomb the best you could, but you need to learn how to take less damage when in a fight. Keep in mind that staying in a fight could mean a lot in a life or death situation. And not just for you, but for others around you as well." "Noted," Izuku said with a nod. Aizawa then turned to the class with a serious expression, making everyone worried. "Before anything else, there's something we need to address," he said, making everyone feel dread, thinking that it's another special test. "We need to select your class president," the pro said in total boredom. "It's actually a normal school activity," the students collectively thought as they sighed in relief. Izuku relaxed on his seat as there was nothing to worry about. Being the class president would essentially mean being someone to follow behind, and although the position did sound appealing, he honestly wasn't sure if he'll even be voted. The students then raised their hands for the position. Oh, I want to be the class president," Mina said while jumping to her feet. "I want to do it too," said Akamo from her seat. Who better to choose than Aoyama, posed with sparkles that made Tokoyami grimace. "Let me take the lead," said Kirishima in the manliest way possible. "Vote for me, you fuckers. I'm sure you know who said that." Well, at least they're sure about wanting the position, Izuku thought as he put his hand down. He figured that if he wasn't sure to have the position, then he wasn't ready to have it. "Silence, please," Ida called, causing everyone to quiet down. "It is a job with the responsibility to lead others." He then stood up with a serious expression. "We should do this democratically and vote who would be the best to lead us," he said as he raised his arms in the air. Suyu tilted her head. "Is it not too early to have developed trust with one another? Plus we might just vote for ourselves," Kirishima added. Ida wasn't fazed at all and continued. "That is precisely why whoever receives the most votes here will be the most suitable," he finished with his usual arm chops. He then turned towards to the teacher who was getting ready to have a nap. "Is that all right, Aizawa-sensei? As long as you get it done, the pro said before lying down. As everyone was given a piece of paper to write their votes on, Izuku stared at his paper before looking around to see who would be the best to vote. He was about to vote for Ida until something caught his eye. Momo Yaoyorozu, if he remembered right, was looking tense. She had her fingers crossed while waiting with her eyes closed. Someone's eager. He glanced around the room and found that nobody looked as hopeful as her. And with that, his decision was clear. He then placed his vote in the bucket with the others. He could have voted for himself, but that felt pointless, considering that could lessen the chances of someone worthy of being the president to win. Plus, he wasn't even sure if he wanted the position. After the votes were tallied, the results made Izuku wide-eyed. "I got 4 votes." He shouted in shock as he stood up. He wasn't alone as Bakugo stood up as well. "The hell?" he yelled. "Who the fuck voted for you?" he demanded as his body shook. "Better than voting for you," Zero said with a slight chuckle before flinching as the explosive teen snapped a Galra at him. Meanwhile, Ochako was looking to the side with a small smile on her face. 0 votes. Ida said with a gloomy tone. Momo gave him an incredulous look. "You didn't vote for yourself?" she stood while muttering. "Even though you were who suggested doing this?" With the votes finished, a nervous-looking Izuku and calm Momo stood side by side in front of the class. From his sleeping bag, Aizawa grunted. "All right, Midoriya will be the class president, and vice president will be Yaoyorozu," he announced as he went back to sleep while his students stared blankly at him. "How vexing," Yaoyorozu said in an annoyed tone as she looked to the side. Izuku noticed this and gently tapped her on the shoulder, catching her attention. "Sorry about this," he bowed a bit, surprising her. "If it makes you feel any better, I wasn't really expecting to win." As her shock wore off, the new vice president realized what she said and looked embarrassed. "I should be the one apologizing. I didn't mean to sound bitter," she finished with a bow of her own as Izuku looked up in surprise. The two then smiled at each other and shook hands. UA Grounds Cafeteria. Izuku sat at the lunch table with his friends. They were joined by Mina's group of friends as well. Momo also sat at the table since she and a girl named Jiro were good friends. "Welp, didn't expect to be class president," Izuku said as he rubbed the back of his head. "I mean, I didn't expect any votes, to be honest," he said, shocking them. Jiro put her glass down before giving him a questioning look. "Why did you think no one would vote for you?" To this, Izuku lightly shrugged. "I dunno." He scratched his cheek a bit. "I guess I just thought I was too plain to vote for." He chuckled. "Too plain?" Kaminari repeated before scoffing lightly. "Pretty sure you're one of the most interesting people here, dude." His point was supported by his fellow classmates. Grinning, Izuku raised an index finger and formed a tiny bonnet. "I wouldn't exactly call myself interesting." His comment was met with chuckles and amused looks. "But if you guys think so, then I'll just roll with it." His smile faltered as he despawned the bone. "I just hope that I can do my job well." "I'm sure you'll do great, Deku." Ochako encouraged as she ate her rice. "Yeah, man." Kirishima agreed with equal energy as he clapped Izuku on the shoulder. "From what I've seen, you definitely deserved my vote," his statement surprised the teen. "You voted for me?" Izuku said in shock, not expecting a vote from the manly teen. Kirishima grinned with a nod. "Yeah," he gestured to Mina. "From what I've heard from my horn buddy here, you're the one who came up with the plan during the battle trial." "He's right," Ida added as he ate. "You not only have great analysis, but you also have a heart of hero. That's why I voted for you as well," he said while giving his friend a smile. "Okay, that's 3 votes down," Jiro said as she turned to Izuku. "Did you vote for yourself, Midoriya?" Izuku shook his head, much to their surprise. "Actually, I didn't vote for myself," he looked to a confused Yaoyorozu. I voted for her actually, said Teen was understandably shocked by this. While I was thinking who to vote for, I noticed that she really seemed to want the position. So I thought, if she's eager, it means she can do it. So I voted for her, he finished with a lazy shrug, while the creation Teen looked embarrassed at being seen that way. He then turned to Ida with an apologetic look. I also wanted to vote for Ida, he seemed like a guy who would take the position seriously, he looked down at the table. But Yayarozu here seemed more determined, so I voted for her in the end, he finished with a slight bow towards Ida. With a smile, Ida gestured Izuku to sit back up. It's all right? He chopped his arms in the air. Thank you for having faith in me as well, he said as he bowed towards Izuku. Though a bit embarrassed, Momo cleared her throat, gaining everyone's attention. Thank you for having faith in me as well, Midoriya. I'll be sure not to waste it, she said with a smile. Izuku waved his hand. Just Izuku is fine, he said, surprising everyone. All my friends call me that, he grinned as he gestured to Bakugo enjoying his meal. Well, except for Kaken, he calls me Deca. He chuckled as the explosive Teen smirked at him. Damn right I do, Bakugo declared as he continued eating, making everyone but Izuku sweat drop. Friends? Momo said after recovering from the shock. Well, Izuku said, gaining everyone's attention. From what I can tell, you're all good people, so I'm sure we can be good friends, he stated with a bright smile. So bright, everyone at the table thought. Meanwhile, Bakugo was muttering something about friendship and bullshit. If that's the case, Momo said, gaining Izuku's attention. Please call me Momo, she offered kindly as she held out her hand, while Izuku nodded with a smile of his own as he shook her hand. So if Izuku didn't vote for himself, then where did the other vote come from? Jiro said while rubbing her chin. I did, Mina said as she raised her hands in the air. The gesture made Izuku hide his face from how adorable it was. Meanwhile, Ochako was internally rolling on the floor from her friend's obvious embarrassment. Mina noticed his blush, and with a grin she continued. I voted for Midori here because he's the man with the plan. She cheered with a double thumbs up. Doing his best to look at her in the eye, Izuku replied. Thanks Aishido, he stuttered out with a light blush. Besides Ochako, everyone else was confused by the sudden demeanor change that Izuku showed. While Mina narrowed her eyes as she leaned forward. I thought I told you to call me Mina? She said in a sly tone as she playfully punched his arm. Izuku's face exploded in red from the contact and shakily replied. Sorry about that, Mina, he gulped with a crooked grin. Mina's faux expression turned into a genuine smile. It's all good, Midori. The OFA user did his best to return the smile before focusing on his food instead, mentally berating himself for losing his cool just now. Deciding to save her friend, Ochako asked. Ida, are you a rich kid? She bluntly asked, making everyone else sweat drop. Our rich kid? Ida asked, a little shocked before looking away. I try to change the way I talk, but I come from a family of heroics. I'm the second son, he said, getting everyone's attention. Have you ever heard of the turbo hero, Ingenium? Immediately ignoring his food, Izuku's eyes sparked to life as a huge smile appeared on his face. Of course. That's the pro hero whose Tokyo office hired numerous sidekicks, he said in excitement. He was about to continue until he noticed everyone staring at him. The OFA user blushed a bit and looked away. Sorry, it's a habit, he said in bashful tone and scratched his cheek a bit, making everyone laugh. Anyways, Ida said, gaining everyone's attention. Ingenium is my big brother, he proudly said, making everyone shocked. Huh, didn't expect someone in our class to be related to a hero, Jiro said with a small chuckle. Recovering from his earlier embarrassment, Izuku asked. So I guess you want to be just like brother then? Ida nodded with a smile. Yes, my brother is known for being a great hero who saves people. I want to be just like him. Everyone at the table gave Ida a smile from his declaration. Even Bakugo looked at Ida with some respect. The moment was ruined when the alarms went off, startling everyone. Beep 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 beep. The siren. Ida yelled in shock as he and everyone else stood up while Momo helped Jiro, who's covering her ears in grimace. Security level 3 breached. Students, evacuate immediately. With that, all the students began rushing towards the exit. And as a result, they ended up pushing against each other, causing the hallways to be flooded with students, which slowed the evacuation down as well. Izuku found himself pushed against the window, and saw that it was the same mob of reporters coming through the gates. It's not a villain attack, it's just the press, he thought as he turned around to figure out a plan to calm the crowd. But just as Izuku figured out a way to tell the students that there wasn't anything to worry about, he saw Tenya in the air. What the? Izuku's confusion was answered when he saw Ochako nearby, the latter watching the taller teen float while concentrating on her quirk. Tenya then used his engines to propel himself down the hall and slammed onto the wall above the exit. He then began yelling, but it was clear that no one heard him or even noticed him above the door. Seeing this, Izuku decided to give him a hand as he formed a small blaster above him and aimed it at the ceiling. He made sure to lower the power as to not blast through the ceiling, although it would leave a burn mark. He then closed his hand and unleashed a blast. ZWOOSSHH. A brief flash of green lit the hallway, accompanied with a sound that startled everyone. Following the source, they saw Izuku with his hands in his pockets, the blaster long gone. With a grin on his face, he pointed to Ida, who was still stuck on the wall. "I think you better listen to him," he calmly said. Following his finger, the crowd turned to Ida, who gave Izuku a look of gratitude before speaking. "It's all right, everyone. Just look. It's just the press." Once they realized they were not in any danger, the students calmed down and began helping others who may have been injured. All the while, Izuku looked at Ida with a smile before nodding to himself. UA grounds back at the classroom. Both Izuku and Momo stood in front of the class, wanting to discuss an idea they both agreed on. After Ida and his fellow classmates calmed the students down, the police arrived to force the reporters off campus. "Alrighty, before we start," Izuku said, gaining everyone's attention. "First off, thank you Ida, Ochako, and everyone else who helped calm the lunchroom down," he said with a smile, earning ones in return. "Now," he continued, "I would like to step down as class rep and have Ida take my place," he finished, shocking his classmates. He then raised his hands defensively with a sheepish expression. We all saw how he handled things back there. He reacted with no hesitation once he figured out the cause. And I'm sure we can all agree that Ida here follows the rules to the letter. Everyone was nodding their heads as they saw Izuku's point. As for Ida, he was taken aback by this decision. He was about object until his classmates spoke up. "You know, I'm okay with that. Do your best. Go for it, dude." Ida then stood up and looked like he won an award. "If the class rep has nominated me, then it cannot be helped," he then raised his right hand in the air. "From this day forth, I, Tenya Ida, promise to do my best to carry out the duties of a class representative," he finished, making everyone smile. However, while this was happening, UA's principal stood at the ruined gate with his fellow heroes. The next day, Aizawa stood in front of the class with another announcement for them. For the Foundation Skill Heroics, Aizawa explained as he stood behind his desk. "You'll be supervised by a 3-man team comprising of me, All Might, and someone else." "What are we going to do exactly?" Zero asked, unsure what to expect. "Preparing for disaster relief, from fires to flood. It's essentially rescue training," Aizawa announced as he showed the confirmation from the principal. "Sounds like a rough day for us," Denki said, unsure if he should feel happy or scared. "Come on bro, this is what being a hero's about." "I'm pumped," exclaimed Kirishima, who could hardly hold his excitement. I'm not done, Izawa said as he pressed a button on a remote. As I was saying, it's entirely up to each of you whether or not you wear your costume, he said as shelves holding their costumes popped out from the side of the room. The training grounds is rather far, so we'll need to travel by bus. That's all, get ready. With that said, everyone grabbed their costumes before going to the changing room. With everyone in their costumes, they made their way outside where Ida was directing everyone into the bus. Form 2 lines, he called while waving at them. Ida? Izuku said, gaining his attention. I don't think it's that kind of bus, he said quietly to try and not embarrass his friend. Unfortunately, after looking at the bus, Ida shouted. Never mind, no need for seating arrangements. He called out as everyone boarded the bus. There was no point. Hamina laughed as she sat down next to Ida, making him sulk a bit while Izuku merely chuckled at the interaction. The bus then started to move, taking everyone to their destination. Inside the bus. Now inside the bus and wearing their costumes, all students began chatting about themselves as no one had been properly introduced. I'm Tsuyu Azui, but you can call me Tsuyu, and I generally say what's in mind. Izuku. She turned to the teen beside her. Your quirk is weird, she said, making him and everyone else laugh. You're not the first one to say that, Izuku said as he composed himself. She's got a point there, you can make weapons and enhanced strength too. Kirishima said with a grin. It's super manly when you think about it. The redhead then held up his arm and activated his quirk. My hardening quirk isn't even near flashy, as though. His grin turned sheepish as he rubbed the back of his head. From his seat, Izuku glanced at the redhead's arm before shaking his head. Your quirk doesn't need to be flashy to be powerful, or even useful. Not only can you pack a mean punch, but you can be a shield for civilians. Kirishima thought about it before he beamed with a toothy grin. A shield, huh? Now that's manly. He crossed his hardened arms in excitement. Seeing an opportunity to have some fun, a mischievous grin formed on Mina's face. Izuku, she said, gaining everyone's attention. Your eyes are really something, you know. She said in a playfully flirty tone, earning sighs from her friends from her antics. Like everyone else in the bus, they expected Izuku to blush and stammer like usual. But what they didn't expect was for him to be oblivious to the tone and answer honestly. Nah, he said with a smile, surprising everyone. Sure, my eyes are pretty neat, but they're nothing compared to yours, Mina, he said honestly as he turned his head towards the window, oblivious to everyone's wide eyes or Mina's suddenly purple face. Meanwhile, no one noticed a big smile on Ochako's face. He's being smooth and doesn't even know it, she thought with a mental squeal at her friend's oblivious points. Mina was stunned from the sudden compliment. Wow, never thought I'd hear someone say that about my eyes. She thought before looking out the window to try and hide her blushing face. Throughout her life, when someone commented about her eyes, they would usually be creeped out or would say inappropriate things about it. Izuku then turned to face them, not noticing Mina hiding her face. But yeah, my eyes do light up when I use my quirk. He shrugged. So I can see what you like about them. Snapping out of his shock, Aoyama flipped his hair. Your eyes may shine, but my naval laser outshines it, he bragged with a smile on his face. This seemed to snap everyone out of their shock and continued as if nothing happened. Izuku then turned to him with a curious expression. But doesn't that make your stomach hurt? He said, making Aoyama sulk. If we're talking about strong and flashy, you can't forget to mention Todoroki and Bakugo, Kirishima said as he glanced at the two. The bicolored teen didn't seem to acknowledge the statement as he continued to look out the window with an unreadable expression while Bakugo just grunted but sat taller. Tsuyu stared at the explosive teen for a moment before speaking. Bakugo's always angry and cursing, so I don't think he'll be popular, she pointed out without hesitation, making Izuku laugh out loud as others were stunned with how blunt she was. Fuck off. Bakugo snapped as he glared at Tsuyu. The frog teen, though, wasn't fazed and pointed to Bakugo with her tongue sticking out. See? She teased, making Izuku laugh harder while others just snickered. After calming down, Izuku decided to throw a bone for the angry teen. You never know, Tsuyu, some people may be a fan of his personality, he said with a grin. Bakugo wasn't having it though. Don't praise me, you fucking bonehead. He growled with his explosive palms ready. Izuku wasn't even fazed and replied. Real original, explosion boy, he casually retorted, making Kirishima and the others laugh while Bakugo fumed. Off to the side, Momo covered her mouth with an appalled. How vulgar. Ochako on the other hand was laughing up a storm. But it's funny. In THR front, Aizawa unzipped his sleeping bag and glanced back with a bored face. We're almost there, settle down. Yes, sir. USJ. Entering the USJ building, the students were immediately greeted by the spacer hero, 13. Izuku reached for his pockets, only for him to stop. Ah, damn. He lowered his hands. That's right, we aren't to bring notebooks. He sighed. Oh well, I can always ask for an autograph next time. Wow. I've always liked number 13. Ochako excitedly said while bouncing up and down. Aizawa then approached the space-themed hero. Where's All Might? He asked in a bored tone. Izuku wasn't able to hear the conversation, but when 13 held up 3 fingers, he immediately understood that All Might must have reached his limit for the day. 13 then turned to the students. Anyway, as some of you may be aware of, my quirk is called Black Hole. Once something is sucked in, it turns into dust. It may be good for rescue situations, but it can also kill, she said in a serious tone, making everyone quiet. Izuku couldn't help but think about his quirk. If he wasn't careful, someone could get killed from his quirk. Whether from friendly fire from his cannons, or a mishap with his psychokinesis. Taking someone's life, accident or not, was something that Izuku didn't want himself or anyone else to experience. His thoughts were then interrupted when he felt something enter his sensory field. Huh? He turned towards the main plaza of the facility, where purple mist started to appear. Sensei. Izuku trailed off with a cautious tone as he summoned a bone club, grabbing everyone's attention. Upon seeing the weapon, his classmates became tense. Snapping to attention, Aizawa followed Izuku's gaze only for his eyes to widen. Huddle together and don't move, he ordered as he stood next to Izuku at the top of the stairs. 13. Protect the students. Looking down, Izuku saw a lot of villains coming out of the mist. After a moment, a hand reached out of the portal. A man then slowly emerged. He had pale blue hair and a mostly black outfit. He had a hand mask on his face, only revealing his bloodlust-filled eyes. He was also covered in hands. Following the blue-haired man was a hulking, dark blue, humanoid-looking creature. He looked as big as All Might. He wore shorts and knee guards. He had a brain exposed with a beak filled with sharp teeth. After they both exited, the portal closed and turned into a villain as well. His body was made of dark purple smoke and he had bright yellow eyes. And wore an outfit similar to that of a bartender. Is this part of the training? Kirishima asked while staring at the large gathering of villains. Stay back. Aizawa shouted as he put his goggles on. Those are villains. With that statement, everyone became tense and grouped up. Where's All Might? The lead villain with several hands said. We went through all this trouble, only for him not to be here, he said in clear disappointment before looking up to the students. I wonder if he'll show up if we kill some kids? He asked in a carefree tone, making Izuku grip his weapon tighter. Aizawa stepped at the top of the steps with a glare on his face. 13. Start the evacuation. Try to contact the school while you're at it. He then looked back to Kaminari. You too. Try and call for help, he said, making the blonde nod. With that, Izuku leaped down the stairs and started fighting the villains, taking them out one at the time, erasing Quirks left and right with no signs of stopping. Despite being outnumbered and outpowered, Izuku was pushing the villains back with near ease. Even if his quirk didn't work on some villains, he had the skills to back him up. Back at the top of the stairs, Izuku snapped out of his amazement and started to move to the entrance with the others. "I'm afraid I can't allow that," the mist villain announced as he appeared in front of the class, cutting them off from the exit. "We are the League of Villains," he introduced in a formal tone. The villain was about to say more, but stopped when Bakugo and Kirishima rushed at the villain. While following their lead, Izuku sent his bone club at high speeds to the villain. Before Bakugo and Kirishima could reach the villain, the bone made contact. The sound of metal being hit and a grunt of pain came from the villain as a result. Following up the attack, Bakugo threw a powerful explosion, while Kirishima used his hardening quirk to punch the villain. During the explosion, Izuku's eyes widened at the realization. "So he does have a body, that means I could hit him with." His thoughts were interrupted when the smoke began to clear. Once the smoke cleared, it was revealed that the villain was fine. "Grr. Fools," the villain said with a bit of a strain from the bone attack, before making his move. Suddenly the smoky substance started spreading around. And in a bit of panic, Izuku used his quirk to save whoever he could from the mist, including Ochako, Mina and Ida, who looked at him with surprised expressions before turning into ones of horror. "Izuku!" Mina yelled in terror. Izuku turned in time to see the portal covering him. "Crud!" was the last thing he said before he was transported. USJ Grounds Flood Zone. Izuku found himself falling towards a large body of water. On instinct he summoned a medium-sized blaster and landed on top of it as it slowed his fall. Coming to a complete stop, he began taking in his surroundings. To his left he can see a boat where Tsuyu and Mineta were watching him. From what he can see, it seems that Tsuyu was going to assist him, should he have fallen in the water. At least they're safe, he thought before hovering towards the boat. On his way to the boat, a villain burst out of the water. "Your chum." However, Izuku had already sensed him, and made a bone club before smacking the villain across the face, sending him crashing to the water. And after making sure the villain was out of commission, he continued his way to the boat again. Upon arriving, he hopped off the blaster and despawned it. "Tsuyu, Mineta. Boy, am I glad to see you," Izuku said with a big smile as he jogged to the duo. "You seem to be fine," Tsuyu commented with a small smile before frowning as she glanced at the water. "Though we're still in a tight spot." A serious look crossed Izuku's face as he looked over to the side, where dozens of villains were surrounding the boat. These guys are ruthless, but even they wouldn't come here knowing that the pros would have this place well defended. His classmates agreed with his point, also thinking along the same lines. "I mean, it's crazy enough to think that these guys believe that they could just do whatever they want knowing that all me dash." And with that, Izuku paused before his expression grew grim as a possibility came to mind. Unless All Might is their target. Mineta freaked out from his claim. "But that's impossible. There's no way they'd kill All Might," the short teen said while pointing to Izuku. "Mineta," Tsuyu said, grabbing everyone's attention. "They must have a way to kill him. Otherwise, what would be the point of being here?" Izuku nodded. "She's right, you know, you'd have to be insane to go here unless you had an ace up your sleeve," he finished, making Mineta more scared than ever. Their discussion was interrupted when the boat started rocking back and forth. Looking down, the villains tore a hole on the side of ship and waited for the entire thing to sink. It didn't take a genius to figure out what would happen once the boat completely sunk. As the boat sank, Mineta was shaking while the other two students tensed. However, from what Izuku could see, they still had some time to plan before the boat completely sinks. Clocks ticking, he turned to his classmates with his eyes glowing. "Right now we need to get out of here and regroup with the others," he looked at the villains. "And to do that we need to fight." Tsuyu nodded while Mineta was still panicking. If it makes you feel any better, Mineta, we have an ace up our sleeve, Izuku said with a grin, surprising the two. If they planned on separating us, they would have placed Tsuyu somewhere else other than the flood zone, he finished, making their eyes widen. But that would mean they don't know our quirks, Mineta said in disbelief. Izuku nodded, pointing a finger gun at him. Bingo. His grin grew wider. And since they don't know our quirks, the villains down there will be too cautious to make any move. He crouched while his point was proven when the villains simply treaded in the water instead of just swarming them by now. With the element of surprise, we just need to make a plan, and they're done for. Once the two crouched next to him, Izuku turned to Tsuyu. I think now is a good time to explain our quirks to each other, that way we'll have more to work with. Tsuyu nodded. My quirk is called Frog, it's a mutant type. I can leap high, climb walls, and my tongue can stretch to a length of 20 meters. I can also secrete stomach acid by taking my stomach out, she said with her usual expression. A blush formed on Mineta's face. Seeker H. A bone club was in front of his face before he could finish his comment. Following the bone, he saw Izuku with a side smile that held malicious intent. Please respect women, Izuku calmly warned, earning a frightened nod from the short teen. Though shocked that the normally calm student can make that kind of expression, Tsuyu replied. Much appreciated, Izuku, she said with a smile. With a nod and a smile of his own, Izuku as he despawned his weapon. My quirk is called Energized Bones. It allows me to not only increase my strength and speed, but to make weapons as well. However, if I overdo it, I'll end up either hurting myself or exhausting myself. I also have a sensory field, that's how I noticed the villains immediately from when we were on the stairs, he finished with a huff. His classmates looked taken aback from the information of what his quirk can do before thinking. Weird. While having an idea what they were thinking, Izuku chuckled. Both teens then turned to Mineta. The purple-haired teen reached up and plucked one of the balls from his head and placed it on the wall. My quirk is called Popo FF, a mutant type. They're super sticky depending on my health level, they stay sticky for as long as a day, he then tapped his hair. A new one will grow the moment one is plucked, but if I pluck too much I'll start to bleed. I'm also immune to their stickiness, and they just end up becoming bouncy when I touch them, he finished explaining. Izuku nodded with a look of fascination. Interesting, he said, making Mineta surprised, not used to his quirk being praised. I believe your quirk is useful for this particular situation, he said with a mischievous grin. Making the two confused. What do you mean? Mineta asked, wondering how his quirk could save them. Izuku smiled. I have a plan, he said, shocking the two. I'm going to create a whirlpool below and scatter the villains, he turned to Mineta. While that's happening, I need you to throw your quirk onto the water, the current should carry them towards the villains, trapping them in the center, he finished, leaving the two speechless. Damn, he's so cool. Mineta thought in awe. Although one thing still confused Tsuyu. But Izuku, she said, gaining his attention, how are you going to make a whirlpool? With a grin on his face, Izuku snapped his fingers and came a medium-sized blaster behind him. With this, he said while pointing a thumb towards the blaster. I'll ride this in the air and blast them, while you and Mineta carry out the plan, he said as he got on the blaster. But what about you? Tsuyu asked in worry, remembering that he could exhaust himself. Izuku just shrugged his shoulders. I'll just meet you by the shore, the two wanted to ask how, but they were wasting time as it is. With a simultaneous nod, the plan went into action. Izuku went into the air, on top of the blaster, surprising the villains below. The hell is that? Is he leaving his classmates? After him. The rest of you, keep an eye on the other two. The group leader said. They didn't get a chance to follow any orders as Izuku charged 5% and jumped in the air. And while in the air, he aimed the blaster downwards. The blaster then formed a ball of energy as it began charging. From below, the villain's eyes widened in realization and started moving. Incoming. Spread out or you'll. Closing his hand, the blaster fired, sending a large energy beam to the water below. ZWOOSSHH. A giant explosion of water was created, and at the same time, Suyu jumped off with Mineta. The short teen then threw his balls into the water and around the villains. The villains were pushed around by the waves, causing the purple balls to stick to them. As the water started to form around the impact area, the villains were dragged in and became stuck due to the balls. USJ Grounds Flood Zone Shoreline. Once they made their way to shore, the two began looking for Izuku as they didn't remember seeing him in the air after their escape. Heya. Startled, both teens turned around and saw Izuku casually standing there with a grin. How does he keep doing that? Both students thought. Izuku chuckled and continued. We need to help the others by the entrance since I'm guessing that the villain with the teleportation quirk will be there, he ended in a serious tone. But how do we get there without being spotted? Suyu said with a head tilt. Snapping his fingers, Izuku summoned a larger blaster before turning to the two. We'll ride this blaster off to the side so that no one within the plaza can see it. By now Aizawa-sensei is fighting for us, and the last thing we need to do is distract him. So once we regroup with the others we can plan on helping him next, he finished, making the two nod. With that the three boarded the blaster and made their way to the entrance. USJ entrance. Upon arriving the students were met with a grim scene. 13 laid face first on the ground with her suit destroyed. Surrounding the wounded hero were the remaining students who weren't teleported, trying their best to help with the injured pro. Upon dismounting the blaster the trio were immediately noticed by the other students. Ochako came rushing to Izuku with tears in her eyes. Izuku, I'm glad you guys are okay. She cried out before she hugged him. With a smile of his own Izuku returned the hug, the feelings mutual. He then looked over to 13 with a grim expression as she. Ochako then let go of the hug and shook her head. No, she's just unconscious, she said with a tired smile. As they all grouped together, Izuku noticed that someone is missing. Where's Ida? He asked while looking around. We managed to help him escape and call for backup, Mina chimed in with a smile. Izuku nodded before turning to the pink teen. I'm glad you're okay too, he said with a genuine smile. Mina looked away with a bit of lilac on her cheeks. Why yeah, you too, she said with a small smile. The moment was interrupted when everyone heard Aizawa's scream accompanied by maniacal laughter. Acting fast, the students went to the edge of the stairs and was stunned at what they saw. Many villains were laid unconscious on the ground, others were about to wake up. But that wasn't the most shocking part. Aizawa was pinned on the ground by the hulking creature with both of his arms broken and face bleeding from being slammed on the concrete. And at the other side was the hand villain laughing with glee. He then noticed the scared students watching, and with sadistic smile he said, "How perfect, we have an audience." He said with a creepy tone that sent shivers down everyone's spines. Taking a step forward, the villain gestured to the beast. Allow me to introduce to you, Nomu, the bioengineered anti-symbol of peace. He announced, making the students tremble in fear. From the top of the stairs, Izuku stared at the creature with wide eyes. So that's how they'll do it, he thought as he began analyzing the creature. If this creature was specifically made to kill All Might, then it was clear that the situation was more dire than he realized. He then turned to his classmates, taking in their expressions of dread before his eyes landed on Mina. If that creature attacks my friends, then... Izuku's eyes glowed as he charged 5% and hardened his gaze as he looked back to the villains. USJ Grounds Plaza. The mist villain appeared beside the hand villain. Tamura Shigaraki, I have returned, he stated with heavy respect. The villain revealed to be Tamura turned to the mist villain. Hirojiri, have you killed 13? The warp villain hesitated before answering. She's incapacitated, but that's not the only thing. One of the kids escaped and went to call for the pros, Kurogiri explained, making Tamura scratch his own neck. If you weren't our ticket out of here, I'd kill you on the spot, the leader growled as he slowly stopped scratching his neck. Fortunately for you, we sent over a dozen decoys all over the city. It will take some time before any pros arrive, he said in a somewhat calm but crazed tone. But before that, he turned to Nomu, who was still holding Izawa down, patiently waiting for his master's command. Nomu, the creature turned its head. Put him flat on his back, he commanded with a wicked grin on his face. The creature complied and placed the hero on his back. Izawa was currently too injured to move, and even if he erased the creature's quirk, the monster was still unnaturally strong without it. It's time to set an example, Tamura said as he looked to the students who were rooted under his gaze. Let's show these kids what happens when they play hero, he said with a cackle. Up on the stairs, the students were all screaming for Izawa to get up, but to no avail. Some even wanted to jump in there and save him, but were too scared to move. But amidst the hysteria, no one noticed a brief flash of green light beside them. Nomu, crush him, Tamura ordered with manic glee. The creature raised its hands before bringing them down in a quick swing. The impact caused a large cloud of dust and released a massive shockwave that could be felt throughout the whole facility. USJ stares. The students were horrified by what they've seen. Some felt like throwing up while others couldn't believe. A well-experienced pro had just been helplessly crushed by a monster designed to defeat the symbol of peace. And no, Ochako despaired as she fell to her knees. He's. Sato looked away, feeling sickened. Suyu covered her mouth with both hands as she stared with wide eyes. This is bad. Mina cried. There has to be something that we can. She trailed off as she turned to her right and saw Aizawa's injured body laying there. Sensei. She screamed as she went over to help the fallen teacher. The other students snapped out of their grief and rushed to his side. But how is this possible? Zero knelt by the pro and produced tape for the wounds as his classmates couldn't respond as they had no real answer to this miracle. While they were treating the wounded pro, Ochako noticed someone missing. Where's Deku? He was right beside me. Mina trailed off. Before Aizawa showed up, she finished with her eyes widening in realization. Everyone's eyes widened as well, coming to the same conclusion. They then rushed to the edge of the stairs while taking care of the injured pros to confirm their suspicions. Back at the plaza, Tamura Shigaraki was stunned. When the dust cleared, he was expecting to see the pro splattered across the ground. He expected the students to cry in anguish as they gazed at their teacher's remains. He expected a dead All Might by the end of the day. But what he didn't expect was to see no sign of the hero, and Nomu with its arms stuck to the ground trying to free itself. Heya. Looking towards the origin of the voice, he was met with a strange sight. Standing in front of the stairs is a teen wearing a green hoodie with his hands in his pockets. From what Shigaraki could tell, he didn't really have anything special on him. Now normally any villain would ignore this, but Shigaraki thought differently. The fact that teen had a calm appearance made the villain eye him warily. But apart from being alert, Shigaraki was angry from seeing the grin. That smile, that damned smile, reminded him of All Might. With that angry thought, he called out, Nomu, get back here. The beast complied and stood right next to him. Tamura then turned to Kurogiri, who was also confused with the teen's appearance. His orders were interrupted when the warp villain was suddenly covered in a green glow before being slammed face first on the ground, knocking him out. Turning with wide eyes, Tamura saw that the teen had a hand stretch out with his eyes glowing in intensity. Putting his hand back in his pocket, Izuku turned his head to the side, confusing Tamura. Following his gaze, he saw that the young hero was looking at the skylight. Thinking that teen must be stalling for time, Tamura was about give Nomu the kill order until Izuku spoke. The villain gave him his full attention. It's a beautiful day outside, Not expecting the comment, Tamura gave him a curious look. Meanwhile, with a grin on his face, Izuku turned his head to face the villain with his eyes closed. Birds are singing, flowers are blooming, and on days like these, villains like you. He trailed off before he opened his eyes, revealing that his scaras were now black, and the only things you could see are the intense glow of his emerald eyes. Should be rotting in a cell, he finished in an eerily calm voice. Tamura Shigaraki didn't know why, but he had a nagging feeling at the back of his head as he stared at the teen. A feeling that he was going to have a bad time. To be continued.